Today I'm going to be talking about sacred reciprocity, geography, and calendrics. This is a picture of Santiago Atitlan, Lake Atitlan. It's considered the umbilical cord, the belly button of the world, the navel of the world. And so I wanted to explain a little bit. In the middle is a hieroglyph, and it says, to seed, he the timekeeper, the librarian, and the ball player. Okay, and then I also wanted to point out the date on the long count, Ishinu, which always means place of corn, okay? And we'll talk more about what the significance of this long count is. But this has been a tracking of time for my people for over 5,000 years. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that developed. When Brian and I first started having conversations about the calendar, I was like, yeah, the calendar does this and the calendar does that. So yeah, we know all that stuff. How did it begin? Where did it come from? And he got me in this process of thinking. And it took 2.5 years to get to this point today. And if I would have presented this paper 2 years ago like what I was originally supposed to, it wouldn't be as comprehensive as it is now. Because over the last 2.5 years, I've grown and developed my understanding of the calendar through the process of writing this paper, analyzing things, going through and getting books that just as I turned in my first draft, I was like, oh, look at this book, you know. So it's been a great process. A little bit about the cultural information. Reciprocity for our people is central. Everything among the Maya is communal. Okay? Decisions aren't made alone. Cofradías are now religious brotherhoods that the Spanish imposed on Mayan peoples, but it was a way to hide traditional customs under colonialism. So these communal decisions have always been made. And we have over 30 languages that are Mayan. There are over 1 million Mayan speakers in the world. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of them are ending up on our southern border as a result of our own foreign policies. And I'll talk a little bit about that through this process because it shaped me as the person I am. Again, our people's primary corn is the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. We believe we come from corn. That's who we are. We've faced persecution for 500 years. Okay? The most recent Mayan genocide ended in 1996. Think about that. That's in my lifetime. That was in my lifetime. I was 20 years old when it ended, and I was a little boy witnessing the effects of a civil war. And a lot of the refugees we have on our borders now are a result of things that happened when I was a boy. Yet, through all this, we have endured. This knowledge that I'm going to share with you 20 years ago would have gotten me killed. The government of Guatemala would have hunted me down and killed me for it. So when we talk about this sacred knowledge, when we talk about the risk to continue those traditions, it's real. And colonialism is real. And the effects of colonialism, the traumas that have come because of colonialism are real. And we need to respect that. And we need to keep that in all of our conversations with indigenous peoples, because it's not just the Maya. Every indigenous people on Turtle Island went through some form, in some way, the same thing. And so we have to find ways of taking what was ours traditionally, taking what is new that has been given to us, and creating something new, something beautiful from that. When I was in Atitlan, I went down with this perspective, like traditional Maya should be always in their traje, always not using technology, you know. And then I see these little ladies running around on cell phones speaking in Sutuil. It's like, wait a second, that doesn't fit. But that's because the Maya were adapting the technologies, as they have for the last 500 years, to continue cultural practices that have been in play for over 5,000 years. Mahon sama, mahon way. Mahon way, mahon sama. No work, no tortillas. No tortillas, no work, right? And it's a symbiotic relationship between the man and the woman. The man has the hearth, or the man has the fields to go work, to grow the corn, and then in the woman has the hearth to make the tortillas, to feed the family so that we continue working, and it's that cycle. And it's that union together. It's not, you can't have one without the other. So let's talk about zero. When we talk about zero in Western philosophy, we talk about zero as the value of nothing, emptiness, right? Mayan philosophy was different. Zero is the beginning of everything and the end of everything. It's the completion. It's right there in the circle, that point that comes together and it ends. So when we were first thinking about zero, that's a hard concept. How do you come up with that, right? Think about this. 5,000 years ago, there's no writing yet. There's no form of communication besides sign language and visual communication, right? Just like kind of facial gestures and whatnot. How did they come up with this concept of zero to be able to do math? How would a person that has no technology get there? It comes right here. Our digits, and we're going to talk more about that. It's the Hunwinak. And the Hunwinak is a formation of 20. 5 fingers, 10 fingers, 10 toes. 20. So we counted with our digits. And when we wanted to count forward, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, let me slow down. So with, again, zero represents birth and death. It represents completion of time. It allows for all these calendars that we're going to talk about to develop because of this concept of completion and ending. How the creator, right, is everything begins, everything ends. Here we go. Everything started with the beginning. The principle that generated everything gave rise to everything. And it started with an initial energy. The stem cell that multiplied 1 and 400 times. The principle of life was endangered lives of others. The principle of life is energy. The principle of life is the mother and father. The principle of life is the seed. The principle of life is the flower. The principle of life is a how. The flower, the 4-petaled flower. So as we're going through and we develop this concept, right, we're starting to think, how are we counting? We're counting with our digits. If this starts at 0, and I am a human being, and actually I should have started the other way, but then it would confuse everybody because I would have gone backwards. 1 day forward. 2, 3, 4, 5. If this is me right here, and I need to go backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll show you a little more right here. Okay, so this is what I was looking for. Hunla. Hunla means 1 day forward. Kaib, ich, 2 days forward. Ishik, 3 days forward. So if I'm a person that doesn't have writing, doesn't have the ability, but I have the language to be able to say, we're thinking 2 days forward. We're thinking 2 days back. Okay? Iwir, yesterday. Kair, 2 days yesterday. Oshir, 3 days yesterday. Right? So I can now contemplate things that happened before, things that happened after. And then right in the middle is Wakimi. Well, Wakimi is interesting because that means today, but it's also, that same word means death, means renewal, means that point where the beginning and end meet, that circle of completion and the beginning of the next completion. So that's why, like, for example, 2012, when people were freaking out, like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, the calendar's ending. Well, it wasn't ending. That cycle was ending, and another cycle was the beginning. And so, again, it's all about cycles, all about beginning, completion. Nikahal is another word for saying the same thing, beginning, end. And finally, Hunwinak, complete human being. And that's something really important. Hunwinak, a complete human being. A complete human being has 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? And so all these concepts around reciprocity, all these concepts around our numbering are framed around the 20. We'll talk more about that. So the knowledge, and I'm reading these quotes because these are quotes of Mayan scholars in Guatemala, so I'm giving voice to their voice. And there are quotes from the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan Bible, is our creation story from thousands of years ago. So just bear with me. The knowledge and exercise of the Cholik orientates the physical and spiritual balance of the people and properties of the harmonic balance between human beings, nature, and the cosmos. Okay? And so as Mayan people went from understanding their mathematics system and understanding the base 20 and creating a system, they started looking at the sky. They started looking at the stars. And they got some knowledge through observational data. This didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a lifetime. It happened over generations and generations. Because unlike today, you can't think of something and have it built tomorrow with a 3D printer, right? Like now we have that technology. But back then, the passage of knowledge took hundreds, if not thousands of years. Time has sped up for us. Technology has sped things up. So things happen really, really quick. But back in the day, it wasn't like that. For a concept to spread, it had to spread over hundreds of years. People would move to a place, they would be somewhere, maybe they would trade with a few people, but they might not see people in the way that we do or being interconnected in the same way. So it took that time. And so as the Maya were doing their observations, they were using landmarks. And so there's question on where the actual calendar came from, whether it was a lowland or a highland origin. I believe it's a highland origin right next to the lowlands. And the reason is because the calendar has information from both highland and lowland areas. And there are spots in Guatemala in the highlands that are kind of like Coconino County, where you go down the rim and it's now jungle. From here to Williams, within 20 miles. You know, like you can be up in the mountains and pine trees like Flagstaff, go down the ridge, and all of a sudden it's lowland and it's jungle. So as they were using these points, these markers, as the sun's coming up and the sun's going down, they were writing this information down. They were telling stories about this information. They were observing this information. And some people, it was really important tracking the sun on sunrise. You know, when it's furthest north, center, furthest south. And for other folks, it was tracking the sunset. It was more important for them when the sun hit the ground, right, at those 3 points. And they would base their ceremonies on that, okay? And like in our Western philosophy or thought, that's like, oh, well, it has to be this way because that's light, so that has to be the good, and this must be dark, so that must be evil, and you can't have evil. It has to all be good. And the Maya had a different philosophy. It wasn't about the two, it was about the four. It was about the balance of the good and the balance of the bad. There were 4 quadrants, not 2. And all that came from this understanding and observation of the natural world. And passing that knowledge on through stories, through songs, through their written books, which today we only have 4 left. So we're left trying to figure out, how did this knowledge become developed? So here's some of the calendars that they developed. It's kind of cool. As I was developing, I said, wow, this is kind of neat. So the first cycle is the 20-day cycle, the Hunwinan, right? The second cycle is the Kaiwinan, which is a 40-day cycle. The Tun, which is a 300-day cycle. And this is where it gets kind of cool, because I put this in parentheses for a reason. 18 times 20 days, or 9 times 40 days. So there's 2 different ways that you can become, that you can track the Tun. Remember how I said some people valued the sun, some people valued the moon, or the sunrise versus the sunset? Well, here's an example of that. Because if you are a solar person, and you track the sun at sunrise, and you look at that information, and you track it by the 20 days, then that's 360 days, which is almost a year, minus the 5 extra days, tracked based on 20 days. But if you're a lunar person, if to you it's more important when the sun sets, for you it's more important when the stars come up first thing in the morning, or first thing in the evening, and you track it through the 40-day cycle, then there are 9 cycles of that. And so there's different ways to get to the same thing. But here's the really cool thing. It's all based on this, the 20 days. And if you remember here, okay, see this? This is 0, 1, 2, right? Now let's go back to this other one here. This is the same cycle. This is 0. That's a how, the creator. So once I was able to match a how with the number in the way that it was developed, then putting the cycles together was easy. Now, here's another thing that's kind of tricky. So next you have the cholik. The cholik is the solkin. You might know that. It's the Mayan calendar everybody talks about, the 260-day sacred calendar. It has 20 cycles of 13 or 13 months of 20 days. That's the 260-day calendar. And then you have the Cholab, which is the 360-day calendar. That is our annual calendar, correct? And then it connects together. And so the Cholab, 52 cycles, is 52 years. And the Cholik, 73 cycles, are 73 sacred calendar rounds. Now, what does that mean? That means that today is 8 Dihash. So 8 Dihash, 6 Wu will not appear again in that exact order for 52 years. That's what that means. So today's day, the combination of the 20 days and the months will not equal the same or come to the same position again for the next 52 years. And that becomes important because that calendar round, we have evidence of being developed in 600 to 700 BC, like in that range. We have our first evidence of it. Not the first time that there was a calendar round. The first time we have documented evidence carved in stone of the calendar round, meaning it was around before then. We don't know how long, but we know that it was. And when we think about classic Maya, we're thinking about the years like 400 to 900 AD. They had the calendar around 1,000 years before that. This knowledge that the Maya shared among their people when the Spanish came in 1500 was already 2,000 years old. They were able to predict things. And that comes to the third phase of, jumping ahead of myself again. Apologize. So this is just more about the Choltun. This is today's date, 13.0.6.7.18, 8 Dihash, 6 Wu. So since August 13th, or August 11th, 3014 BC, 13 Baktuns has passed, no new Tuns, 6 Tuns, or no new Katuns, 6 Tuns, 7 Winaks, and 18 days have passed since that start date. So it's almost like the speedometer on the odometer on your car. That 0 point is that 0 point, and it's been tracking time. And so by being connected to this, I'm being connected to my ancestors. By paying attention to this and knowing what day is happening, I'm being connected with my ancestral knowledge. And it helps me not just with the stars, but it helps me with knowing, what are the energies that are favorable these days? What are the things that maybe I should be mindful about? How should I interact with people based on these energies that were developed through observation? Dihash, today's date, is medicine. Okay, the symbol is kind of a. It's a visual. I'm sorry. Right here. That's Dihash, and it's the front of the knife for surgery. Okay, and it's a day of energy to remove unhealthy situations from one's life, and to ask for health and prosperity for community. Because again, remember, for Maya, it's all about reciprocity. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. We take care of each other. Right? So again, everything comes back to reciprocity. Everything comes back to being in balance with nature, being in balance with each other. being in balance with ourselves. So, and this is again predictive astronomy, and they knew how to walk to the right places on the right days, how to do the work on the right days, how to speak the right words on the right days. From among all the days with 13 numbers and 20 days, 260 in all, the days it takes from the time a vestigial being first makes its presence known in the womb to the time it sees the light. Okay, so this is really interesting. One of the things that has come up with the Cholik is that 13 times 20 is 260 days, which is almost 9 months. Well, guess what happens over 9 months? And what was he referring to or alluding to? Pregnancy. Human gestation. From the moment the seed, right, came together to the moment the child saw the light, during that process is one cycle. Okay? And so, for our society, when we were more in tune in the calendar and the energies of the earth, and the earth was more in balance than it was today, people would use the calendar to decide when to have babies, so that their child would be born on certain days, so that they would have certain energies and have certain qualities, and so that they would be able to tap into those qualities. And then this is a kaik. We know. This is 40 days right here. So if you look at the numbers, I did it the way that's traditionally done with the 2 columns, if you've ever read hieroglyphs. And this is a count of 20, and this is a count of 20. Okay, and here's the thing that's really interesting. So this is for a tune cycle. Remember I was talking about the 9 times 40? Okay? It begins on Imosh, 1 Imosh, and ends on 1 Ahau. The tune cycle is a terminal cycle. That means Ahau is the end glyph, and when they recorded it, they would record it by the end glyph that calendar was. So like instead of saying January 1st, 2020, let's say, they would say December 31st, 1999, and that was the date that they would record or whatnot. The other thing that's really interesting about this, if you look at the Cholik calendar, it begins on Bats, which is directly opposed from Imosh. So if this appears Imosh, this is the first day of the Cholik calendar right here. And when you make it a circle, it's directly opposed to it. So again, the Cholik is a lunar calendar based on the 9 moons, human gestation, and the Menhab is the solar calendar based on a lunar year. So what this is this is tracking the Venus in the morning as the Venus star, as the morning star, and in the evening as an evening star. And they were able to track it through their calendar. The 104-year cycle. So if Venus starts off in the sky in the morning, right here, it won't be in that exact spot again for 104 years. It'll be a little different this and there, and it won't be in that exact spot on the exact glyph that it is today. So if today it was, it wouldn't happen again for another 104 years. Okay? Have any of you ever heard of the new fire ceremony in Mexico? Yeah, every 52 years they did a new fire ceremony. They would turn off all the fires, and this was among the Aztecs, but they would turn off all the fires in the land. And then they would wait until the Venus star would rise. And when they saw it, they would start their fire. And from that fire, they would take it everywhere else and do a new fire. And it only happened once every 52 years. So as a human being, we maybe, if we were lucky, would have a chance of seeing maybe 2 fire ceremonies in our lifetime. Maybe if we're like a real sacred elder and well taken care of and take care of ourselves, maybe 3, but that's pushing it, right? And they were able to track this knowledge and pass it down. So by 800 AD, during the classic time, they could predict where Venus would be based on these glyphs. So if their calendar, one of these days came up, they knew that the Venus star was going to show and would only show in the east on these glyphs, on these 5 days. And same over here. if these 5 glyphs came up, they knew that Venus would show up as an evening star. And then these glyphs here, as of right now, don't have any astronomical significance. They're not tied to anything. But that was pretty wild, you know. Like when I realized that and read that, I was like, wow. How do you come up with that kind of knowledge? What kind of observational data do you have to collect to create that? You know what I mean? Like that's pretty. I'm really proud to come from descendants of those people. You know, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so now we're going to get into the lessons of mice. From the fog, clouds, in an instant there was creation. When it was advised that the water formed the mountains, and instantly the mountains were created. Popolu, which is our creation story. So we're going to talk a little bit about Hunwinak. We talked about Hunwinal, now we're going to talk about Hunwinak. Guess what? They're the same thing. Okay? When I'm referring to Hunwinal, I'm referring to numbers. When I'm referring to Hunwinak, I'm referring to people. Hunwinak. One complete person. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Okay? So in this process, everything is framed around 20. Right? So on certain days, certain energies, certain people will go into certain professions based on what days they were born on. Society was organized. The political science of the Maya was organized based on the calendar. There's another cycle of years, of 13 years and of 20 years. The May cycle, they would actually rotate leadership among the different cities in their Mayan provinces based on 13 and 20 years. So the Katun is 20 years, they would rotate it. So 1 year Flagstaff would be the capital. Next year, or 20 years later, Williams would be the capital. 20 years later, Winslow would be the capital. And it was that constant shift of responsibility. Even in the Cofradia, no one's ever the cabecera forever, right? You got to go through all the stations. You got to start at the beginning. You got to be the initiate. Then you have to go through and you got to go get water for everybody and do all the things that they need you to do. And little by little, you earn your way up in the different spots. So when you're finally the cabecera, like there's people that go into debt to pay for the village festival, you know, for years. But that's the responsibility to the community. That's the post. And then once they've done that, they're a principal or a leader of the community, an elder of the community, because they've done all the responsibilities to offer out the ceremonies for the community. And those ceremonies, even though now it has a kind of a Catholic kind of a facade in front, in Santiago Titlan, they just did the Easter celebrations last week, and that is the World Renewal Ceremony. Okay? It's a little off. It doesn't quite match the calendar we have anymore, because 500 years ago when the Spanish came, my ancestors were looking for ways to hide their knowledge, and so they didn't get rid of their knowledge and take on Catholicism. They found the areas that were similar and kept their traditional customs and beliefs and just put the facade of Catholicism over it and continue to do the same ceremonies. So when in Santiago, when the Catholic priest is talking the resurrection and whatnot, the cofrados, they're doing their part through the world renewal. Because in the 5 days from the Tun to the new year, there's a transition of 5 days, because 360, if I start on Imosh, I'm going to end on Imosh every single time. We need those 5 extra days to change the year that it starts on. And there's 4 year bearers. And I don't know if you've noticed, but up at top, those are year bearers. Those are moms. Okay? Rilach mom, old grandfather. And they are the people that hold up the sky on those 5 nameless days. And during that time is when they're in charge and bad things can happen. But if we do our ceremonies right during that time, those things don't happen. And the world continues, right? And so, again, even though it's not exactly the way it was 4,000 years ago, the same ceremony has happened 4,000 years ago because it's been syncretized, right? They took what was given to them and made something beautiful out of it and continued their traditions. This whole framework, understanding the calendar, is all about relationships with others, relationships with ourselves, right? Relationship with nature. Unfortunately, in these days, we've forgotten that. And one thing that I think is really important when we talk about this knowledge, the calendars, because it's real easy to get esoteric and go New Age on it and blah, 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 right? How does it apply to today? How do we apply this to our lives? That's the real question. Why does this matter? Otherwise, I'm just in the ivory tower talking about, these cool little hieroglyphs and, if you look in the stars here, there, but what good is that if it's not being used? And that's why I do what I do, which is work with children and try to pass on that knowledge, pass on that system, and not just to Mayan children, because I don't work with so many Mayan children, but a lot of Nahua-based and Mesoamerican children, right? So, and this knowledge, the Maya were the most sophisticated of this knowledge, but they weren't the only ones to have this knowledge. This knowledge was across Mesoamerica, even up here. Our relatives, the Hopi, they have their beliefs that some came from down south, and we have that connection. This is not Mayan-specific knowledge. We, dress it up in this way or whatnot, because that's culturally specific to us, but that doesn't mean we have ownership of this knowledge all by itself, because people all through the Americas came up with this knowledge and have their own names for these same concepts that I just shared with you. And so Mayan culture continues, We survived, despite 36 years of civil war and 300,000 people being killed, mostly by their own government, and thousands of refugees at our border here, we survive, we continue, and the customs are being preserved. I just described to you what Easter Sunday looks like in Atitlan. And guess what? When they're going through doing the ceremonies and the processions, guess how they're dressed, right? That's our ceremonies. But you can see, we have books and knowledge coming out from Mayan publishing companies. That knowledge is there and it's being shared, it's being taken that ownership. And that's really important for indigenous people to do. Because like I said, it is not good when it just sits on a shelf in someone's office, right? My dad's an anthropologist, I'm an anthropologist, we're applied anthropologists. What are you doing that can be used by the people that you're working with? So they can turn around and use it for something to further their people. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not about us going and doing our research about them to make a name for ourselves, right? Like people got on me like, why didn't you put something out for 2012? So much of the calendar, da, da, da. Like, you know what? I'm not ready. I wasn't ready till I got ready for this presentation, that I understood to the level that I needed to be able to share these words in the way that I am. And I'm grateful that you're recording this, because there's a good chance I may never say this presentation the exact same way again. And so, in conclusion, Wakshi, because remember, we start off Wakshi, we end Wakshi, 0. In completion, how do we heal through whom we know? Good people to each other. We pay attention, we're mindful. We pay attention what's going around us in nature. Maybe if I don't have ceremonies to connect with, what can I connect with? And one thing that I tell the families that I work with that kill up is that you build the community you want to live in. And you create the world you want your children to live in. Everything I do, all the knowledge I share, all the things I teach, I do it for my children and their children and all the children that are our future. And I look at the world right now, the way it is right now in 2019, and I think about it the way it was when I was a little boy in the 80s, and how different it is, how many species have died off, how many plant life has died off, how many elders and knowledge has disappeared because we've been wasteful, because we've been disrespectful, because we have a consumer mindset instead of a mindset of reciprocity. instead of a mindset of giving back and only taking what we need rather than taking everything so that I can have surplus. And you know what? I don't care if you have problems. That's your problem. That's a wrong mindset. And we're getting to that point with climate change that we need to learn to be in balance with each other. Because we're about to hit that cliff. I mean, I remember in the 90s them showing us videos, this and that, and now it's 2019 and people are freaking out because the glaciers are melting faster than they expected to. You know, and they're saying like we got 5 to 10 years. It's like, man, if what's just happened over the last 10 years is going to accelerate, we got to do something, you know? And it's easy to get, you know, depressed or sad or feel like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. There's nothing I can do about this. But there is. And that's be good to each other. Reciprocity. Be good with nature. Do your little piece. Be grateful. You know, something that a lot of people forget about, whether you pray to Jesus, Allah, How, the Creator, whatever name you give to your Creator, something that a lot of us forget about is gratitude. Be thankful for what you have. Be grateful for what you have. Too many times people pray for, oh, I need this, or please get me that, or oh, this, but they forget to say, thank you for all the blessings in my life. Thank you for all the opportunities given to me in my life. And that's how we make a better world. That's how we heal ourselves and heal others. Because I'll tell you what, I don't want my children to be raised through the violence and dysfunction that I saw as a child. Right? At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, what we want is to create a better world for our children, for humanity. And if we don't have children, for other children, for the human race. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have the same blood and, you know, the same DNA. You know, even monkeys are a little further away than we are each other. You know, we're the same people. You know, we just, like they say in the Popol Vuh, different people were baked as corn from the sun at different temperatures. And some people the sun liked more and cooked them a little more. And some people were further away from the sun and got cooked less. But at the end of the day, right, it's all about that we're people of corn. We're grateful for Creator, for the sun. Because how is the sun? And how convenient is that when you think about metaphor? Like the Maya hid their religion through Catholicism. The sun, God, His Son, the Holy Trinity, right? And the Holy Ghost. Aha, completion. The beginning and the end. So, Malchawe, gracias, thank you.